In the early 1970s, Sarah was a young college student looking to save some money on her travels. Hitchhiking was fairly common back then, and she never thought much about the potential dangers. One summer, she decided to hitchhike from her university in Oregon to her hometown in California, a journey of about 200 miles. She had done it before without any issues, and she saw it as an adventure. Sarah set out on a bright and sunny morning, backpack slung over her shoulder, and a cardboard sign that read California in big bold letters. After waiting by the side of the road for about an hour, a car finally stopped. The vehicle was an old dark blue sedan, a bit worn, but still in decent shape. The driver rolled down the window, revealing a middle-aged man with a friendly, if somewhat weary face. He introduced himself as Jim and said he was heading in the same direction and would be happy to give her a ride. Grateful for the lift, Sarah climbed into the passenger seat. Jim seemed like a regular, harmless guy. He wore a plaid shirt and jeans, had a neatly trimmed beard, and his car was clean, if a bit cluttered with maps and empty coffee cups. As they set off, they chatted casually about various topics: the weather, music, and their respective lives. Jim mentioned he was a traveling salesman, which explained the maps and cups, and he seemed genuinely interested in Sarah's studies and plans. For the first hour or so, everything seemed normal. The sun was shining and the landscape of rolling hills and distant mountains was beautiful. However, as they drove further, the atmosphere began to change. Jim's questions became increasingly personal and invasive. He started asking about Sarah's family, if she had a boyfriend, and whether anyone knew she was hitchhiking. Sarah tried to steer the conversation back to neutral topics, but Jim's persistence made her uneasy. Around this time, Sarah noticed they were taking a different route than she was familiar with. The road was less traveled, winding through dense forests and remote areas. When she asked Jim about it, he brushed off her concerns, claiming it was a shortcut. His tone was dismissive, almost condescending, which only added to her growing discomfort. As the miles passed, Sarah's unease grew into outright fear. Jim's demeanor became more unsettling. He started making strange, cryptic comments about life and death, about how people often took their safety for granted. His eyes, once friendly, now seemed cold and calculating. Sarah's instincts screamed that something was very wrong. Desperate and scared, Sarah began to think of ways to escape. They were driving through a particularly remote stretch of road with thick woods on either side and no other cars in sight. She knew she had to act fast. Summoning her courage, she asked if they could stop so she could use the restroom. Jim hesitated for a moment, his eyes narrowing as if he suspected something, but then he reluctantly agreed and pulled over near a thick patch of trees. As soon as the car came to a stop, Sarah grabbed her backpack and bolted out of the car, running as fast as she could into the woods. Jim yelled after her, his voice echoing in the quiet forest. But she didn't stop. She ran deeper into the forest, her heart pounding, branches scratching her arms and face, until she was sure she had lost him. Exhausted and terrified, she hid behind a large tree and waited, barely daring to breathe. Sarah stayed hidden for what felt like hours, listening for any signs of Jim. She heard his car engine start and drive off, but she didn't move. She was too scared that he might come back to search for her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Sarah finally mustered the courage to emerge from her hiding spot. She made her way through the woods, carefully avoiding the road they had been on, and eventually found another road. As she walked along the road, every sound seemed amplified in the growing darkness. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl, even the crunch of gravel under her own feet made her jump. After what felt like an eternity, a passing motorist, an elderly couple in an old station wagon, saw her and stopped. They were kind and concerned, and after hearing her story, they took her to the nearest police station. When Sarah told her story to the police, they took her seriously. They had received similar reports about a man matching Jim's description who had been suspected of several assaults on hitchhikers, but they had never been able to catch him. Thanks to Sarah's detailed description and quick thinking, the police were able to identify Jim. They conducted an investigation and eventually tracked him down. He was arrested and charged with multiple crimes, ensuring he would never harm anyone else. Sarah's encounter left her deeply shaken. She never hitchhiked again and always urged others to avoid it. The trauma of the experience lingered for years, with Sarah often waking up in cold sweats, haunted by nightmares of being chased through the woods. Her friends and family supported her through her recovery, but the fear never fully went away. Years later, Sarah shared her story in hopes of warning others about the dangers of hitchhiking and trusting strangers. She became an advocate for safety, speaking at schools and community centers about her experience. Her story serves as a chilling reminder of the potential dangers that can lurk behind seemingly kind faces, and how a moment of quick thinking and courage can save a life. In the late 1980s, Emily, a free-spirited and adventurous young woman, decided to hitchhike across the country to visit her friends on the East Coast. She had always loved the thrill of meeting new people and hearing their stories. It was a sunny afternoon in June when she found herself on a long, desolate stretch of highway in the Midwest, thumb out, waiting for a ride. After about half an hour, a dusty old pickup truck pulled over. The driver, a man in his late 40s named Tom, offered her a ride. Tom had a rugged appearance with unkempt hair, a scruffy beard, and piercing blue eyes. He seemed friendly enough, so Emily hopped into the passenger seat, grateful for the lift. As they drove, Emily and Tom chatted about their lives. Tom said he was a trucker who had recently retired and was now enjoying the freedom of the open road. He mentioned he was heading to a small town not far from Emily's destination and could drop her off nearby. Emily, enjoying the conversation, didn't notice at first when the scenery began to change. The highway gave way to narrow, winding roads through dense, unfamiliar woods. After a while, Tom's demeanor began to shift. He became quieter, and his answers to Emily's questions were curt and evasive. Emily felt a growing sense of unease but tried to remain calm. She asked how much further until they reached the town, and Tom glanced at her with a strange smile, saying it wasn't far. Minutes turned into an hour, and the trees grew thicker, the road more isolated. Emily's anxiety skyrocketed when Tom suddenly turned off the main road onto a dirt path leading deeper into the forest. She asked him why they were going this way, and he replied that it was a shortcut. His tone was now cold and uninviting. Emily knew she had to act fast. She casually mentioned needing to use the bathroom and asked if he could pull over. Tom reluctantly agreed and stopped the truck near a clearing. As soon as the truck came to a halt, Emily grabbed her backpack, threw open the door, and ran into the forest. Tom shouted after her, but she didn't look back. The forest was dense and disorienting. Emily ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding, branches and underbrush tearing at her clothes and skin. She could hear Tom crashing through the forest behind her, cursing and calling her name. She didn't stop, didn't slow down, until she could no longer hear him. After what felt like hours, Emily stumbled upon a small, abandoned cabin. Exhausted and terrified, she hid inside, trying to catch her breath. She stayed there, silent and still, until nightfall. When she was sure it was safe, she ventured back into the forest, eventually finding a road. She walked for miles, her body aching and her mind racing, until a passing car stopped. The driver, an elderly woman, listened to Emily's story and took her to the nearest police station. The police took Emily's account seriously. They had received reports of other hitchhikers going missing in the area, and her detailed description of Tom and his truck helped them launch a search. Days later, they found Tom and arrested him. He was linked to several disappearances, and Emily's escape had finally brought him to justice. Emily's experience left her deeply traumatized. She never hitchhiked again and became an advocate for safer travel practices. Her story serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of hitchhiking and the importance of trusting one's instincts.